Now, Gary Lineker, you know him, of course. He's been rebuked for tweeting about political issues by a senior BBC journalist, political and current affairs journalist, Neil Henderson. And that was basically on Twitter. They had a little exchange because Gary Lineker was putting out a tweet complaining about essentially Conservative MPs and his allegations they voted to dump sewage in the sea. Don't want to get into that. We'll do that another day if you really like to. And Neil Henderson tweeted to Gary Lineker, "Does not our duty of impartiality apply across the BBC?" Gary Lineker comes back, "Only in news and current affairs, surely you know this." Neil Henderson, who makes a superb point, "The BBC lives or dies by its impartiality. If you can't abide it, get off it." And I think he's neatly summed up both probably, and I don't know this, a growing irritation with Gary Lineker because of his celeb status. He gets away with casting all these opinions from the BBC, when in fact journalists and others in the BBC, way beyond journalism, avoid it for all sorts of reasons, because they know the BBC is a public service, that it is funded by you and me, and therefore they respect the rules. So in an era where we've been challenging prime ministers and politicians about the way they behave, as if it's one rule for them and one rule for us, I think Neil Henderson has highlighted that Gary Lineker thinks he's in that same elite group. And it's disappointing in many ways. Gary Lineker could be a force for good in his own game. I think professional football is actually at quite a low. It seems time after time we have professional footballers being on trial for some hideous reasons, sexual assaults, rape, so forth. We know all about that. We read about it far too often. We have seen at a time of clear financial hardship for so many that the obsession of the illustrated of the wives and girlfriends of Premiership footballers that we saw in this Wagatha Christie trial, which we'll be taking a slightly lighter look at later, have made it clear to us that it's not politicians who are living in a bubble. It is these rather overindulged and pampered partners of professional football, and indeed some of the footballers themselves, divorced from reality at a time when they shouldn't be. And Gary Lineker, who was an outstanding footballer of his generation, who's a very, very good commentator, could actually be a force for good if he started to stick with looking at his own profession rather than his post-Brexit obsession with attacking the Conservative Party, Conservative MPs in particular. Whatever his politics, he should remember that he is bound by impartiality, even if not part of a current affairs team. Even if that proves to be the case, which I doubt, it would be the sensible spirit on which the BBC was founded that Gary Lineker embraced that rather than apply the one rule for him, one rule for them rule to himself. It's disappointing. I think at a time when Premiership football, which is very much and should be the people's game, needs a complete makeover to get them more grounded, to get them more professional, and to actually get back to loving the game and not worrying about your brand and your image. And using wives and partners as if that they are great, they're giving us a great insight to their lives is something we should all respect and be engaged with. Far from it. I think it's actually bringing the game into disrepute. Gary Lineker could be doing so much. I have no idea if he is or he isn't. For the lower leagues, for the inspiration needed to bring youngsters on in the game, for reform of the FA, for the reform of the whole football game as we know it. There is much that he could be a great influence on, but he's not. in my opinion, he's focusing his attention on his lucrative career at the BBC, and yet breaking the rules to intervene in things that personally, whilst I suppose it's fair to say he's not particularly qualified to know the detail on, he has every right to share that view. But if he wants to do that, Neil Henderson is absolutely right. If you cannot abide by the simple rules and principles that are founded behind the BBC, then get off the bus, Gary. I think it's time for you to decide what you want to be. I hope that you do stay at the BBC. I hope that you become a force for good in football and less of a force of irritation that the rest of us are all beginning to feel, including your colleagues in the BBC. That could be a great step in the right direction. And you may ask, why listen to me? Well, okay, fair question. But we capture the views of many other people here. We're privileged to do this job, but we work in a media that does have opinions. We are encouraged to have opinions here. And the fact of the matter is, people come and work for this station because they can have those opinions, and they have actually left the BBC because they're not allowed to have those opinions. Why don't you apply that rule to yourself and make a decision about where you want to be? Because I think we'd all be grateful if you could settle that one all, particularly your colleagues.